Hello, I'm Dr. Yang Seung-min. Anterior maxilla is aesthetic area to place an implant. So many things need to be considered. For successful upper anterior restoration, aesthetics of the restoration as well as the aesthetics of surrounding soft tissue is essential. For that, the implant placement depth is very important. Today, I'm going to talk about the implant treatment process and the components of aesthetics. First, today I'm going to talk about the elements of maxillary anterior aesthetics, dental and gingival compositions. After considering those, how to plan the treatment should be determined. The number of implants to be placed and the implant positions. And lastly, summary. First, elements of implant. Procedure of implant treatment. First, pre-op evaluation and treatment planning, and then implant surgery and prosthetic treatment and maintenance care. In many cases, we are too much focused on implant surgery, and we are making too much efforts focusing on that. However, there are determining factors for the surgery. Most important one is pre-op preparation. Implant surgery is just implementing what is prepared, how to place an implant and what prosthodontic materials would be used. The overall plan should be established first before implant surgery to gain good outcome. Let's look at this case. Number 12, implant was placed. Do you think the doctor who placed implant intentionally made it that way? I don't think so. What was the problem? I believe the doctor did the surgery after considering, for example, the implant placement depth and the surrounding bone and soft tissue before the surgery. I believe the doctor tried to make the outcome very similar to the natural tooth as much as possible. But I still think the pre-op preparation was not good enough. So I think to make up for that, other prosthodontic approach was used. However, at a glance, you can easily say it is far from being aesthetic. What do we need to consider? The teeth in the maxillary anterior. Not only just the mouth, we look at the face. Let's look at the aesthetic components before smile and after smile, and they are very different. And what are the components? Lips, teeth, and gingiva. We actually overlook the lips. The lips are very important in determining the aesthetics of upper anterior. And this is a very broad subject to address in a short period of time, so I'm going to focus on teeth and gingiva in this lecture. Before that, let's talk about the aesthetic components, the 4 of them in the upper anterior. Facial composition and dentofacial composition, dental composition, and gingival composition. And I'm going to talk about teeth and gingiva today. Let's look at the dental composition in more details. Do not be concerned about the numbers. Look at the angles. Number 3, the long axis is maintained, and look at the forms of the teeth. Also, the embrasure between the teeth at number 6, it is on the gingiva as well as the incisor. So we need to consider them. And after that, we need to look at the smile line, the arch area. If they are in harmony and pretty, we can realize they look very beautiful. Such alignment is the composition of dentition. We also need to look at gingiva. It is not indicated here, but in terms of the position, relatively, we need to look at the color of gingiva or the embrasure space indicated as number 2 or other gingival line, how it is composed of. They need to be in harmony. White aesthetic, pink aesthetic need to be considered. The gingiva and dental composition can be understood. In these pictures, dental composition can be different in two pictures. Triangular form of teeth or square form of teeth can exist. At a glance, the gingiva embrasure is different between those two. First, in terms of the form, if the teeth are in triangular form, its characteristics is that in general the distance between the contact point and bone crest is long. If papilla has disappeared, it would be very difficult to fill the gap or the space with soft tissue. So for the triangular shape of teeth, in terms of the relation between the teeth and gingiva, it is important to prevent the perio disease. In this case, the contact point can be managed to be brought up or down using prosthodontic technique so that the embrasure part below the contact point, the interdental papilla area, can be filled. If teeth shape is square, we can approach it easier than the triangular form because the height of contact point to bone crest is short, so it can be filled up rather easily. As I said before, we need to look at the gingiva. The color should be noticed. Simply put, we need to look at whether it is healthy or not. If there is inflammation, it will look red, and if it is healthy, it will have coral pink color. So that difference can exist. As I said before, the gingival embrasure, the interdental closure should be checked, and the relation between the cervical gingival line and teeth. Here it talks about the zenith of gingival contour. Zenith means the most inferior part of the gingival contour, and it should not be positioned at the center of a tooth, but should be distal. So at each tooth, we need to check them and the balance of the gingival level. When gingiva is very healthy and the teeth look squared, we need to look at the teeth and the gingiva. The gingiva contour look very natural, and the interdental papilla area is fully filled. However, when the form is triangular, for example, if number 11, the color is different from other teeth, it's because inflammation occurred. Between number 11 and 21, the interdental papilla area is quite lost. To cover it prosthetically, the contact point between 11 and 21 is quite low at the incisal part, and the contact point can be brought down a little bit, then the teeth would look squared. So this should be considered and reflected in the treatment plan so that they can be implemented during surgery, which is very important. So when we look at the form of teeth, we can check this. But one step further, we can check the gingival line. In general, it is called a gal angle, maxillary dental midline, and gingival line of 1, 2, 3 are connected. And we need to look at the position of number 2. And class 1 in the classification means the number 2 tooth is under the inferior of the line connecting number 1 and 3 teeth. And the angle is between 45 to 90 degrees. Class 2 is between the angle of 45 and 90 degrees, but the position of number 2 is superior to the line connecting number 1 and number 3. And class 3 means the gal angle is 90 degrees, which is ideal. And class 4 means that cannot be determined because it is edentulous case. So it differs from person to person. If you look at here, it's the same patient, but the teeth appear to be different. The contour looks a little bit different, and the form of teeth as well. How can we implement that? From the maxillary anterior perspective, this is not necessarily related to implant. Here, crown lengthening is done, and the gingiva is cut off as desired. Bone contour is controlled. If you look at closely, something is on the teeth. That means something will be made if the size of teeth comes like this. So using the template, we are controlling the soft tissue as well as the hard tissue. If you look at the picture at the bottom right, the embrasure is open and you can see the gingiva control line and the roots are a little bit exposed. Based on that, prosthesis is completed. As you can see on the top right, the teeth and gingiva are harmonious, very aesthetic. That means soft tissue and hard tissue cannot be separated. They move together. Just before, we looked at the shapes of teeth and interdental papilla of gingiva. And below it is the periodontium, referring to the gingival contour and bone. When it is triangular, actually the teeth have rather thin bone, and if it is square, the bone tends to be thick. So when we place an implant, all these need to be considered. When we restore an implant in the upper anterior, if the teeth is shaped as a square, the gingival biotype would be thick and the bone contour below it would be thick. That's what we can expect. If the shape is triangular, we can expect the bone contour below it would be very thin, and the gingiva would be very thin scallop type. That's something we should know, and the information should be used when we place an implant or make a prosthesis so that aesthetic results can be achieved. So it is very important to establish the treatment plan based on the information, as I said before, rather than just focusing on implant surgery. Aesthetic analysis should be done in advance, and we need to reflect the characteristics of a patient in the treatment plan. Based on that, the surgery should be conducted to achieve a very aesthetic outcome. In general, when we establish implant planning, we need to decide the placement time, how many implants are needed, whether hard or soft tissue augmentation is necessary. That should be in the treatment plan. When we set up the treatment plan, we need to think about the time of treatment. Is it going to be an immediate placement or is it after extraction? Type 1, 2, 3, and 4 are the types. Type 1 is immediate implant placement. Type 2, 3, and 4 depend on the healing period after extraction. The biggest difference is in the extraction defect, we can do the immediate placement or socket preservation based on the treatment plan. In the healed site, the tooth is already extracted, so if hard tissue or soft tissue are deficient, augmentation can be done. You may make the judgment by looking at the situation, but using a model or X-ray or intraoral pictures of patient, the plan can be established. That's important. If you look at this case, how to treat the patient, what is your choice? The outcome is very aesthetic, but what do you think? Do you think the implant was placed immediately or after the site is healed? In this case, there was a huge deficiency in soft tissue and hard tissue, so the tooth was extracted and the socket preservation was done to stabilize the hard tissue and soft tissue. After a certain period of time, the implant was placed. Or I can place the implant immediately and the deficiencies can be addressed with the immediate bone graft and soft tissue graft. All of this should be considered before the treatment to achieve a pretty good outcome. What do you think about this case? If you look at here, number 11 and 21 have big bone deficiency and there is inflammation. Gingival line itself is not very good. Can you place implant immediately? I would do the site development first. In this case, bone graft and the soft tissue graft were done first before placing implant and doing prosthesis. Here you can see a lot of tooth loss in the upper anterior. Soft tissue and hard tissue status was checked and implants were placed. If you look at it here, the contour is dramatically changed. A temporary prosthesis was used before final prosthesis, and the position of number 2 compared to the original plan is type 2 gingival line, the aesthetic line, which was explained before, but overall the prosthesis looks okay. In the upper anterior, when there is a tooth missing, one implant can be placed. Depending on the site, simply the situation can be maintained. However, the problem is when more than one teeth are missing, like 2, number 1 and 1, we can place 2 implants, but depending on the edentulous span, we can restore one and the other one cantilever, but there can be something like this. When 3 or more are missing, we can place 1 for each, but depending on the shape of the space, we can use a bridge. If upper anterior has a huge bone defect, we can place 2 implants next to each other and not favorable area can have a pontic. That should be incorporated in the treatment plan. Fitting the situation, if the missing area is broad, we need to determine whether we will restore each one of them or use a bridge, or cantilever, which should be in the treatment plan before surgery. If you look at this case, a periodontal disease is quite progressed and it is treated to complete the prosthesis. The gingival line and the contour compared to before are not really bad, but if you compare them, we may think, was it the best treatment that they could do? Of course, it was the best treatment we could provide. However, if you repeat the surgery, side effects can occur. If you look at the distal of number 21, the gingival line is quite recessed. As the surgery was repeated, at the site bone loss occurred. Because of that, unexpected things may happen. If we anticipated that and did the planning more carefully before surgery, it may have been avoided. But the patient was very satisfied. So we need to think about whether the treatment was the best for the patient. That should be reflected upon. If it was not the best treatment and if it could have been improved, we need to think about how you can improve the treatment. And we need to think about, is the hard tissue or soft tissue augmentation really necessary? After extraction, if we place the implant immediately, where does it need to be positioned? That's very important. You need to have the information. It should be palatally positioned compared to the incisal line to be most safe. So this is how it was placed. We need to check whether the position is really what we want. This position is hard to drill in the maxillary anterior, so stent can be used for the drilling, and it has been improved quite a lot. So guided surgery is used quite often. So in the guided surgery, specific device is used so that the guide is not pushed around, so that drilling can be done in a place where we want. Such devices and instruments are available. If we use them, even beginners can drill accurately. What is important is that rather than going into the surgery immediately, you need to obtain information from a patient as much as possible, and all such information should be combined together to come up with a treatment plan. Based on that, you need to decide whether soft tissue or hard tissue augmentation will be made before surgery, and most importantly, these steps need to be established as principles which should be adhered to. That is very important to obtain a very good aesthetic outcome. That's a tip. In the anterior maxilla, we need to understand the aesthetic elements. Based on that, we need to obtain a lot of information from a patient, and we really need to concentrate our efforts to establish a treatment plan based on such information. The most important part when it comes to the implant treatment planning is, as I said before, the positioning. On how to do accurate positioning. For this, you can get various help, or if you have abundant experience, you can do it without help. So the positions need to be determined before you treat the maxillary anterior to have very good outcome. At The upper anterior implants should satisfy in terms of functions and aesthetics. It is a very challenging area to do the treatment. As much as it is challenging, the satisfaction level after the treatment would be very high. For satisfactory procedure, I hope you gain a lot of clinical know-how. This concludes the lecture, and thank you very much for joining me.